I hope you loved this video. Again, thank you so much for those of you who have joined me on... Morning everybody, happy Friday. Okay, I'm so looking forward to the weekend. This has been a monumentally long week. It's been absolutely insane. And so with that being said, let's start the video properly. There it is, okay. Cheers to all of you, seriously. Oh, what a week. Okay, so you know how there are these kind of mindset shifts, new perspectives that every now and again you learn about and it's like, oh, that's so right, like that changes everything. Well, I think that today's video might just be one of those huge shifts in mindset and perspective that can really help a lot of language learners change the way they think about their short and medium term goals and really genuinely impact the outcome of their studies. So I hope that you will be one of those people. Let's jump into today's video talking about achieving native-like moments. Really quickly, I just want to start the video by saying a huge thank you to all my new Patreon supporters. There are now 15 of us on that page. I'm really excited. I love you all. The support has been amazing. And for everybody else, of course, if you like this video, then please do consider subscribing. Okay, so a lot of times we talk about the importance of goal setting, both short, medium, long term. I've had videos on this in the past when it comes to creating actionable goals, right? Goals that are very clear and specific. Now, very often people will have this goal of being native-like in a language, right? And so to me, this actually is a good example of a goal that's a little bit deceiving, right? It sounds like maybe it's quite specific, but when you really think about it, what does it mean to be native-like? When you say that your ability is going to be native-like, you're going to be a native-like speaker of Japanese, for example. Well, that is a massive thing. It is truly huge. And for example, it's very context specific. You may develop an incredibly good level of skill to talk about certain things, but then you may end up in other conversations about certain topics where you may suddenly drop to like an intermediate level because it's just so large. Language is a very big thing. And so having a goal of being native-like, I'm not saying it's bad as a really overarching high-level goal, but the point is that it's actually incredibly unspecific. And again, achieving it truly is a massive feat if you really want to be native-like on a grand scale. Well, if we shift that goal just a little bit, so that instead of saying I want to be a native-like speaker of Japanese, to I want to achieve as many native-like moments in Japanese as I can. Well, all of a sudden, that tiny, fine detail just shifting around in our perspective, that makes that goal incredibly attainable, even if you are, I would say, an intermediate learner. Because even at the intermediate stage, it's totally feasible and possible for you to have those moments where you say something, even a single phrase, and people say, wow, that was really, like, how did you know how to say that? That's exactly what we would have said, right? It's super possible. I've done it in all my languages. I've had those moments, even at the intermediate level, where occasionally I'll say something and people are just blown away. And it's different, right? There's this thing that's famous in Japanese or in Chinese where maybe you'll say ni hao, and yeah, okay, people compliment you. They say, oh my God, your Chinese is so great. But this is different. These are moments when people are truly shocked and they are impressed, and you can tell that they're not just giving you a superficial compliment. They're genuinely flabbergasted and they're impressed and they're excited that you just said something that just connected with their heart. You know when it happens, and it's a beautiful moment. And like I said, you can start to have these moments very early on in your journey relative to, you know, being a native-like speaker. It's a very different story. And so what I like to do is focus on creating and sort of cultivating those native-like moments in my everyday interactions when I can get them, well, then it slowly evolves into, okay, how can I create more and more of these native-like moments? How can I now perhaps eventually get to where one time every conversation people are kind of surprised? And by the way, it's not always explicit. Occasionally you don't always get this like direct shock from the native speaker, but I'm telling you, you know, right? There's a special little ignition that happens when you say something. It's like hitting a golf ball or a baseball, any kind of hitting sport. You know, when you hit it just perfect and there's a sound, there's a feeling, something that you feel in your whole body where you know that it was just right on the mark. And that, I'm telling you, that's what it feels like when you just get it right in a conversation. And so, like I said, I may progress to then trying to see, can I have one of these moments once every conversation? And then eventually what starts to happen is that these native-like moments start to kind of connect to each other and sort of one runs into the other. And so this is where you really start to shift into an incredibly good speaker of a language, when maybe the balance actually shifts to where, you know, every other sentence you say something. It could just be the exact perfect choice of word or vocabulary. It could be just throwing in an idiom at the exact right place. You start to get to where maybe even the slight majority of things that you say are, you know, native-like moments or close to. To me, that is an amazing goal. That is a much more attainable, realistic, and it feels like a more specific goal to me. It's just saying like, can I at least get to where, you know, again, a lot of things that I say sound native-like in particular conversations. So now let's talk about how do we actually create these? Well, in my opinion, this follows on perfectly from the last two videos we had this week. So Wednesday's video this week, we talked about strategies for effective note-taking. And one of my core principles that I shared when I was kind of showing off these Mandarin Chinese notes, and by the way, a lot of you downloaded this from my Google Drive. I'll share the link again today. Feel free to go and ask for permission. I'll give it to you in case you want to see these nice and close. But one of the core principles was that I'm constantly writing things down as I hear or see them, especially if I have some kind of resource where I can either read it or I can watch something live and then I can sort of see the subtitles underneath. Whatever gives me the ability to consume things that native speakers are saying in a conversation or a dialogue in a book, and where I know that that is an incredibly natural native thing to say. And so even if I understand it, even if I'm able to grasp it, those are the things I write down with the most enthusiasm. Because the moment I hear a phrase where I'm like, ooh, that's a good one. Ah, yes, I love it, right? I want to write that down. But the thing is then, what do you do with that? So I want to shift gears a bit because I've been showing you my Mandarin Chinese notes quite a lot recently. So now I'm going to actually go through on my phone. I'll show you a screen capture of one of my memorized decks. So back when I was learning German previously, I was at that sort of pretty strong intermediate stage. Right now I'm reviving my German, so I have a whole series on that. But what I would do is I was studying these episodes of Easy German, which are these very, very natural street interviews with native speakers, and they go around and ask people the same question in every video. And so you get to have lots of very, very spontaneous, natural responses to the same question. And so naturally, there are going to be some similarities, but of course, every single person has a very different answer, a very different way of speaking. And so for me, it's solid gold because I have that, but I also have, in my case, the English and the German subtitles. Easy Languages, the organization, is fantastic because they have the same thing for many, many languages. So what I would do is I would do something very similar to this as step one, right? So I would just write down by hand. Part of that is because it was nice and easy. Part of that is because I wanted that cognitive depth where I was actually handwriting these things. The second thing I would do though, once I would have a big list of these phrases, is I would put them into Memrise. And so if we look through, this is episode 77, where we're talking about getting older. And so they were asking the question of, you know, how does it feel to be getting older? How do you think about this as a general concept? And so in here, I have some just absolutely wonderful phrases. So for example, at the start of the video, they said, ich habe mich heute eine ganze besondere Frage ausgedacht. Right? So today I've thought of a very special question. I remember thinking to myself, ooh, I could say this in my YouTube videos in German one day. Next, just a simple question, wie fühlt das an, right? I wanted to capture this because we have this concept of separable verbs. It's an interesting question. And now one thing you'll notice as we scroll through this deck is that there are actually very few individual words. Even things like this, im Leben. You notice that I included im Leben, right? Because I want to know, okay, not just the word Leben, but how is it used, right, in the context of a sentence? And so I captured that. And so again, like, look at this. This is so great. Ehrlich gesagt, merke ich nicht so richtig, right? It's wonderful. Honestly, I don't notice it so much, right? This is just solid gold. I can't explain enough. Just like, oh my God, look at this. To be at peace with something. Mit etwas im Reinen sein, right? It's just like, and then look at this. After that, I captured it in the context of the actual sentence. Ich bin da mit mir im Reinen, right? And so I just really, and look at this. Oh, it's just, you know, when you come to terms with it, it's good. Again, how do you say that in the language you're learning? To come to terms with something. It's very difficult to say, but so I've got it here. Wenn man nicht damit zurechtfindet, ist es gut, right? So my point here, I guess, is that the way that you cultivate these moments for yourself is that you have to start with these note-taking principles I shared in the last episode, where you're going to capture all these little turns of phrase, idioms, great vocabulary words, patterns, anything you can find that is really, really natural, and it's exactly what native speakers say to express things that resonate with you. After that, you can use tools like Memrise or Anki, for example, to create these flashcard decks that are going to allow you to not just learn the vocabulary words, but able to actually internalize and solidify these fantastic patterns. And then after that, you can go back and review the original content. So in the case of Easy German, what I used to do is then I would walk around and I would listen back over and over and over again. So I had a playlist of about 15 episodes, and I had already studied front and back, inside and out, all those 15 episodes. I knew all the words, I knew all the phrases, and so when I was walking around the streets, I would listen to those and I would repeat out loud, I would try to shadow things. And I'm telling you, what ends up happening is that you'll find yourself in conversations where the perfect situation arises and you can just say one of those phrases where you're like, you know what, yeah, I mean, when you come to terms with it, it's good. But here's the sort of evolution. The next thing that happens is you start to be able to be flexible. So instead of saying, when you come to terms with it, it's good, then maybe in a conversation, it's more appropriate to say, yeah, you know, it was really difficult for me, but eventually I came to terms with it and now it's fine, right? You start to be able to recognize what are the core pieces of this phrase that make it so native-like, but how can I then adapt it to a different scenario? And then eventually you start to combine these different things. And so you may have a native-like moment that is the combination of 3 or 4 of these different things. So I guess the key here is that you have to A, extract these things, but B, you really need to give yourself a way to internalize them. And so for me, this actually is a scenario where I think flashcards can be incredibly helpful because it's a very hyper-focused way for you to, like I said, assimilate that knowledge. Okay, everybody, I hope that was helpful. I really do believe that this is so important. And I think there are so many people just shooting for these super high, amazing goals, which is great, but then there's no like middle ground. And then this becomes this crazy thing that you're like, well, one day I'll be native like. I think having this very simple shift in perspective all of a sudden gives you a goal that you can work towards right now. How can you cultivate these native like moments? How can you have your very first one, right? And then the second one, then the third one. And like I said, then how can you have one every conversation? and it just goes on and on and on. So I would love your feedback on this topic. I hope you loved this video. Again, thank you so much for those of you who have joined me on... Apparently, good old La Marzocco wanted to be in the video. I was gonna say thank you so much for those of you who have joined me on Patreon once again. Okay, have a great weekend, a great Friday, and I'll see you back here on Monday for the next video.